They tumbled out onto the floor of a torchlit corridor, which had every sign of being well-traveled. It was clean, well-lit, and they could hear voices, very faint and very far away. They looked up at Selquist, who was still in the pipe. He handed down several objects wrapped in cloth, which he'd left inside the pipe on his previous visit. Then he squeezed out and dropped to the floor himself. Grinning in triumph, he turned to his companions. They were staring at him in dismay. All were covered from beard to boots in greasy black soot. "This is the ideal disguise," said Selquist triumphantly. "I used it myself with much success on my last trip here." He handed them objects wrapped in cloth. They were brooms. "Now, if anyone asks, we're chimney sweeps." They shouldered their brooms and marched off down the corridor. Rounding the corridor, they stepped onto a balcony overlooking Thorbidin. Each halted, awestruck. The view was magnificent. The entire nation of Thorbidin is housed inside the Carolus Mountains. Here are 7 major cities, 3 farming warrens, 2 governmental areas, a fortress at Northgate and Southgate, and the City of the Dead. From their vantage point, the dwarves could see only a small portion of the vast delvings, but what they saw was enough to stop their breath. Far off in the distance, they could see the famed life tree of the Hylar, the enormous stalactite that was a self-contained, heavily fortified city. Selquist herded his team over to a staircase, which was cut out of the rock wall, and zigzagged down the side of the cliff. Slowly, the dwarves made their descent. The 4 traveled north toward the city of Thumodlin, where Selquist had some connections. No one paid much attention to them. Several long hours after they first entered Thorbidin, they finally reached the outskirts of the city. Another hour and they found Chronix in a local tavern. Chronix and Selquist had become acquainted the first time Selquist visited Thumodlin. "As you requested, Chronix, I brought along my friends," said Selquist. Chronix broke into a gap-toothed grin. "Good," he said, rubbing dirty, pudgy hands together. "For this job, that's very good indeed." Kang was still nursing a hangover when the news of the dragons reached him. Stemp, the reconnaissance officer, gave the report.
"My patrol sighted a dragon heading west across the Plain of Dust. The patrol leader didn't get a very close look, but he thinks it was a red dragon. He didn't sense the normal dragon dread that we used to feel whenever any of Paladine's cursed worms came near us."
"One of our queen's dragons, flying in broad daylight? Something's up," Kang muttered. 2 days later, Kang and a troop of draconians from 1st Squadron hid in the shade of a gigantic pine tree, waiting. At length, they spotted 2 specks moving steadily and rapidly forward, heading toward their position. The troops stayed under cover, while Kang ventured forward to get a better look. The specks turned out to be 2 red dragons with 2 dragon riders. They'd been flying from west to east, when suddenly the dragons veered from their path. They had spotted Kang. The 2 red dragons landed 50 feet in front of Kang. They regarded him with sneering disdain. Their riders wore full dragon armor, a type Kang had never before seen, black metal with red facings, adorned with emblems of death. One of the riders dismounted and began to walk toward Kang. The rider was helmed, wore a sword. Kang could not see the face. He stood in silence, leaving it to the rider to speak. The dragon rider pulled off her helmet. Hair as red as the fiery sun was pulled back, away from her face. "I am Talon Leader Huzzud, Knight of the Lily, as is my companion. We are the scouts for the 5th Army of Conquest, led by Lord Ariakan, ruler of Ansalon." "Ariakan?" he repeated the name. "In a relation to Ariakas, the long-dead former ruler of Ansalon?" "Lord Ariakan is his son," she said coldly. "I am Kang, commander of the 1st Dragonarmy Engineer Regiment. You call yourself a Knight of the Lily. Is that anything like a Solamnic Knight of the Rose?" He expected this question to be answered with a foul oath and spitting denial. Instead, to his astonishment, the woman nodded gravely, solemnly. "We are equal in rank and in honor," she said, "though not in our beliefs. Times have changed, Draconian. Those of us who serve the Dark Queen have learned our lesson. We Knights of Tahesis are pledged body and soul to Her Majesty, to our duty as soldiers. Our duty lies in serving her to the best of our abilities. All are subsumed in her greater glory." Kang had never heard any servant of the Dark Queen speak like this. Generally, her greater glory came second to greed, lust, ambition, and self-aggrandizement. If what this knight said held true, then this Ariakan might be a commander Kang could respect. "So, Draconian, I take it you are the lone survivor of this engineer regiment?" "Not quite alone, Sir Knight. Kang said with a grin. A wave of his hand brought the draconians to their feet. The rider, startled, took 2 steps backward. Behind her, the red dragons lifted their wings, thrashed their tails, and dug their feet into the sand. This is the 2nd troop of the 1st Squadron. I have over 200 engineers in my command, Kang said with pride. If this Lord Ariakan is looking for soldiers, I would be pleased to speak to one of his commanders. The rider hesitated for a moment, staring at the draconians scattered about the hill above her. The army is 3 days' march behind us. We intend to camp in these very foothills. If you will tell me where your village is located, I will send a messenger. That won't be necessary, Kang said. We'll wait here. She gave a cool nod, turned smartly on the heel of her boot, and mounted her dragon. She lifted her hand to Kang in salute. The rider's wingmate joined her in the air, and the dragons flew off across the desert. Selquist and his friends had done well for themselves in Thorbidden. Silver mugs and bone candlesticks were among the newly acquired treasures. But the most important item was a book about a Daywar raiding party from 30 years previous. Selquist sent Mortar and Pestle off to sell the newly acquired wares in Pax Starkus, while he and Augur remained behind to read the book. The book was written, so they discovered, by a Daywar scribe who was in the service of the Daywar Thane at that time. The scribe had been sent along on the quest by the Thane to keep a record of the expedition. The Daywar had left their home in Thorbidden and traveled up to the approaches of the Doom Range Mountains, which were covered by regiments of draconian warriors. Then they made their way to Neraka, which is where the Dragon High Lords stored all their booty, or so Selquist had heard. Augur read,
We have been underground for 4 days now. The quakes caused the walls of our cavern to cave in, but the stone held the roof in place. We found 2 black-robed mages, alive under all the rocks. We dug them out and killed them. They did not try to cast spells. We continued to dig in the chamber. According to the map, we should find a huge oak case which contains many magical items and money and jewels. Selquist and Augur were beside themselves. The next day, we finally broke into the storage antechamber. The damage is not as bad there. The south wall held. The spellbooks were still in place on the shelf. We took them and several weapons that we believe are magical, plus some other stuff. We're all going to be rich, richer than the Thane, richer than all the Thanes in all of Thorbidden. Selquist jumped up from the table and did a little dance around the living room. What does it say next? He cried. We have filled nearly all of our packs with steel and jewels. Yes, yes, Selquist sang and danced. Commander Grumwald says he feels great magical power coming from this room, so we kept digging. Selquist relapsed back into his chair, breathless. What did they find? Go on, go on. Later that day, just after midday break, Kovas discovered 10 dragon eggs in a container under a wall support. What a find. They're still intact, and they're worth more than all the other items combined. Selquist looked stricken. That's it? That's the big treasure? Augur glanced down the page. Yeah, it looks that way. Dragon eggs, Selquist was gloomy. Maybe there's more. Later, Visik found some writing on one of the storage cases. Norhas translated, as best he could. These eggs purportedly contain female draconians, which were never permitted to hatch. Still, the outer appearance of the eggs has been unchanged. Grumwald says we could still sell them as regular dragon eggs. Let the buyer beware. The rest of the book described the Daywar's journey home. The next to the last entry read, Grumwald and I hid the treasure in a very cunning hiding place that no one will ever find. The last entry went as follows. Grumwald was executed on the Thane's orders for trying to keep the treasure all for himself. He did not know that I was writing this journal, or I'm certain he would never have left me alive. I have been handsomely rewarded by the Thane. The map to the treasure trove is in this book, which I will soon hand over to the Thane. Feverishly, Selquist grabbed the book from Augur and searched for the map, but it wasn't there. But the scribe said that the map was in the book, said Augur. Selquist sprang to his feet with a wild, aha! He pulled a knife out of his boot, slid the blade inside the front cover, and turned the leather back. The map is in the book, Selquist said, and triumphantly held up a folded piece of parchment. It was indeed a map, indicating a maze of tunnels and passageways. The map was obviously drawn by dwarves, for it was extremely detailed.
Selquist studied the map carefully, then suddenly let out a cry.
Yippee! I know where this is. Look, here's South Gate down here, and North Gate up here. The chamber where the map starts is to the left. It can't be far from the secret entrance I found leading into Thorbidin.
We're going to get rich from this one, aren't we, Selquist? Arger asked.
Yes, Selquist agreed, his voice choked with emotion. Very rich indeed.
The Draconians, bivouacked in the hills, spent the next 3 days watching the army of Lord Ariakan cross the plains of dust and establish a camp in the mountains. They were excited at the prospect of once more going into battle. When the army was settled, Kang was invited to meet with Lord Knight Sykes, the commander of the army of Tarkesis. Kang worked his way down the hill to the command tent. They were expecting him.
"I present Robert Sykes, Lord of the Skull," announced the knight who served as the general's aide.
Sykes regarded Kang with frank curiosity.
"Greetings, Commander."
"Kang, sir, of the 1st Dragonarmy Engineers."
"Indeed?"
The Lord Knight smiled slyly. Half an hour later, after both parties discussed their battle histories and the armies under their command, Lord Knight Sykes led Kang out of the tent to show him the new army of Lord Ariakan. Lined up in front was an entire squadron of mounted cavalry, lances held in the upright position. The knights came to attention when the Lord Knight appeared.
"As a young man,
Lord Ariakan was a prisoner of the Solamnic Knights for many years after the war," Sykes explained to Kang. "They treated him well, for they admired his courage and his skill. He, in turn, came to admire them." Kang blinked. This was new indeed. "He learned from them as well," Sykes continued. "Learned much that he put to good use when he was finally able to escape. The oath and the measure that we once used to sneer at kept the Solamnic Knights a cohesive unit, even through those years preceding the war when they were reviled by the populace. Lord Ariakan instituted the code for our forces. The code and the vision guide our conduct on and off the battlefield. With this code and the vision, we will bring peace and order to this chaotic world." None of the knights moved a muscle in the saddle. They kept their horses under strict control as well. Knight and horse might have been carved of obsidian. "Tell me the code, my lord," Kang said. "The code is different for each of the 3 orders of knighthood. The code for the Knights of the Lily is independence breeds chaos, submit and be strong. The code for the Knights of the Skull is death is patient. It flows both from without and from within. Be vigilant in all and skeptical of all. And for the Knights of the Thorn, who are wielders of magic, the code reads, one who follows the heart finds it will bleed. Feel nothing but victory." And the vision, my lord?" Kang asked. He approved highly of all 3. "The vision comes to each of us from our queen," Sykes said. "It is given to each, suited to each. From this we know our direction. From this we find our inspiration. My lord, it has been many years since my troops have served our queen. Still, fighting is what we were bred for, what we're best at. Our engineering skills may prove of value to your army. I offer you the 1st Regiment of Draconian Engineers to serve as engineers for your army. I believe it to be the Queen's will." "I accept your offer, Commander Kang. There's a great deal that you Draconians can do for me. When can you be ready to move?" "In 4 days." "Excellent. Meet us at the 1st mountain pass leading into Thorbidin," said the Lord Knight. "I look forward to it." He strode forward to inspect his command. Kang left with the sights and sounds of armored knights wheeling in perfect formation. He felt blessed as one who had come home after a long, long absence.